Hello.
Hello.
You're listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening, a podcast about David Lynch and Twin Peaks.
I'm Indigo.
And I'm Hilary.
And listeners, we're going to tell it to you. We're going to tell it to you straight. Today, we're talking about
the work of Satoshi Kon.
The dreamer who dreams and then lives inside a dream. But who is the dreamer?
This is a foolish place to be, to inquire about the master of this dream. The conceit of the daytime residents is what the nighttime residents want. To come in carelessly is like a moth to a flame.
And that's from Satoshi Kon's film Paprika. We're going to start today with just a brief biography of the subject of today's discussion, Satoshi Kon. So Kon was only 46 years old when he died of pancreatic cancer in 2010. He grew up in Hokkaido, Japan, and he was a fan of manga and animation from early childhood. He debuted as a mangaka when he was in college, and he later found work as Katsuhiro Otomo's assistant. Between 1984 and 1997, Kon worked as an animator, a layout artist, a production supervisor, and scriptwriter on a variety of animated films. And then, in 1997, he released his directorial debut, Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue was an artistic triumph, but it was not financially successful.
Sounds familiar.
His next film was both. Millennium Actress in 2002 was a success at the box office and earned numerous awards.
Yeah, including tying with Miyazaki's Spirited Away for the grand prize in the Japan Agency of Cultural Affairs Media Arts Festival. Mm-hmm. And then he went on to, in 2003, make Tokyo Godfathers. 2004 was Paranoia Agent, and then 2006 was Paprika.
And Paranoia Agent's a television series.
Yes, much like Twin Peaks.
Absolutely.
And when he died, Kon was working on his next film, The Dreaming Machine. The three main characters of this project appear as drawings and statues, actually, throughout Paprika. And I'm a huge Kon fan, and I stand by this. I say this to people all the time. I really think that if he had lived longer, I think he would be absolutely a household name, like Miyazaki in the terms of animation. It was a huge loss when he passed away. Also, backtracking a little bit, even before any of his film work, Kon had a manga called Opus that was serialized in the manga magazine Comic Guys from October 1995 until the magazine's cancellation in June 1996. This was his final manga before switching his focus to anime, and Kon later referred to it as a failure since he had to put it on a permanent hiatus. But I think a lot of fans would disagree.
Yes.
It's another work that ties in well with his frequent theme of who is the dreamer that we Lynch fans are pretty familiar with. The fandom post described it as rife with questions of existentialism and predestination, which I think could be used to describe a lot of Lynch's work as well. Also, it's important to note that the version that you would find now, if you buy it, is an omnibus that was specifically made to include a lost chapter that was found in like 2010 and was never originally published. It's just like a rough sketch. It's not fully inked or anything, but it's important because this is a point where Kon inserts himself into the manga. It's already a meta plot line of an author's creations coming to life, essentially, and being forced to reckon with that, the power of being a creator. And so then when he inserts himself into this story as well, it's a huge part of the narrative.
So why are we talking about Satoshi Kon on a podcast about David Lynch?
Well, for starters, it was actually a request from our friend Colin from Cream Corn in the Universe. He had messaged me and asked if we had considered ever doing an episode. And I have been a Kon fan for years, and I was like, Colin, you're so right. We have to do that immediately. So I proposed it to Hilary, and she was super down. And honestly, the more we dove into it, because these were all films and stuff that I had seen. I actually had not seen Paranoia Agent yet, but I had seen all of his films and read Opus, but I had never done it through the lens of Lynch. And revisiting all of these texts with that in mind completely changed the way that I saw them. But yeah, what did you think, Hilary?
Well, I had no exposure at all to Satoshi Kon before this, and I'm not a big anime fan at all, and so I don't gravitate toward it. And the reason I think that's relevant is if you, listener, are not a particular fan of anime, you may still love Satoshi Kon the way I have fallen in love with him. So you don't need any kind of pre-existing affinity for this genre in order to really love his work. And I'm just hooked. I can't stop talking to people about how great this stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I know I had brought up to you, was that I hear it all the time that people say, like, I did not think that I was an anime person. I didn't think that it was for me. And then they realize, like, Satoshi Kon's work welcomes them in such a way that it reminds them that animation isn't just for children.
Oh, heavens no.
You know, I mean, like,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that I think a lot of people view it through this lens of like, oh, well, that's like an art form that's really immature or something. And then you see Satoshi Kon's work and you're like, oh, this is like if like David Lynch or like Michel Gondry made an animated film, because it's so deeply complex and mysterious. And that's just the way that he would want us to talk about it, because he himself is a fan of the mystery.
He is. The Lynch connection. Now we don't have any evidence, and we've looked, and many fans have looked for a connection that would say that David Lynch was aware of Satoshi Kon's work. However, we do know that Kon was very aware of Lynch and was a fan.
Yeah. In 2007, Kon described his favorite kind of film to the Washington Post and cited Mulholland Drive as an example. He said, "Movies that you can watch once and understand entirely, that is the type of movie that I don't really like. However, if you are able to understand 70 to 80% of what's being relayed, and there's still some percentage left that would allow for your own interpretation, that's the type of movie that I do like. There might be a certain part that you don't quite understand, but there is a portion that rests in your heart. David Lynch's Mulholland Drive is a movie where you watch it and you understand a portion of it. And even though the exact meaning of what he's trying to relay might be unclear at the moment, there is something that draws out your interest and keeps you fixated on the screen because you want to know what will happen next."
Satoshi Kon, we agree. But that's also so true of his films as well. Well, many fans of both directors have noticed and written about the similarities between these directors. It would be so easy and convenient, to see the relationship between the works of David Lynch and Satoshi Kon as a straightforward one-way influence. But the timelines don't work.
Which is actually pretty fitting for their work and the ways that they play with timelines and reality.
Yes. Perfect Blue is released in 1997, and it is echoed in a spooky way by Mulholland Drive in 2001 and Inland Empire in 2006.
And Paprika and Inland Empire were released in the same year and share additional resonances.
Now, Paranoia Agent, released in 2004, was clearly influenced by Twin Peaks. But again, it gets stranger, because Paranoia Agent is almost a bridge between the original series and the third season, The Return. It seems to build on the original series toward the themes and larger questions raised by the third season.
Yeah, I think that honestly, I would highly recommend to fans. I'm going to do this myself. I think I'm going to rewatch season 1 and 2, then rewatch Paranoia Agent, then rewatch The Return, and do it in that order. And I think that I'm going to gain some knowledge.
You know, after watching Paranoia Agent, which you hadn't watched,
Yeah.
I got so excited. I thought, my goodness, we could do an entire episode on just this show. So listeners, if you want to take that project on, we'll be all ears.
Yeah.
But again, because the timelines don't match up for this being an obvious case of Lynch influencing Satoshi Kon, we instead see these filmmakers' work seeming to be in a kind of accidental conversation with each other.
Yeah.
It's almost as if one film says something and then another film by the other director answers, or it's a call and response between the two. Absolutely the uncanniest of uncanny resonances.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to psychic self-defense, I wonder if we could see them as astral Siamese twins in a way.
I love that. You know, in the history of science, there's this phenomenon called multiple discovery. It's that strange pattern of multiple people working independently and sometimes on opposite sides of the globe, making scientific breakthroughs at the same time. So like the invention of calculus or the theory of natural selection, even the invention of the telephone are examples of this phenomenon. So if we imagine this happening in the arts too,
Yeah.
it's almost as if Kon and Lynch are creating under the influence of multiple discovery.
Well, and I think that that is something that can apply to so many things, because if we think about like cultures all over the world that had no way of communicating in the past, that have like eerily similar legends or mythology and stuff, there is just perhaps this larger subconscious that we all share or something. I don't know.
Certainly David Lynch believed in that,
Yeah.
right? With the unified field. And I know that Kon talked about like the collective unconscious as well. So we're listeners, we're not saying that's the answer. We're just playing with theories.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if that was the answer.
Well, a major concurrence between these two artists is their interest in the blurring of reality and dream. The two quotations that we opened the episode with, you know, again, seem to be in dialogue with each other on this topic.
Yeah, that was something that, again, revisiting these films and watching Paranoia Agent, rereading Opus, you know, viewing them through this Lynchian lens, revisiting them and viewing them through that Lynchian lens, it is so easy to notice all these patterns.
Definitely. We really wrestled with how to organize today's conversation. Well, we've settled on kind of going chronologically through Satoshi Kon's work with a special focus on certain films and Paranoia Agent. Similarly, we realized through our conversation that we were focusing on, more of a handful of Lynch's work as opposed to his entire filmography.
The main ones where we see a lot of connections is, in terms of Kon's work, definitely Perfect Blue and Paprika and Paranoia Agent are the main texts that we can see through a Lynchian lens. And then in terms of Lynch's work, we see a lot of Kon's energy in Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, and then Twin Peaks. So 2 movies and a show for each.
We're going to start with Perfect Blue.
So with Perfect Blue, listeners, if you haven't seen it, we're just going to give a little intro to these texts as we discuss them. So this follows an idol, Mima, as she is dealing with a lot of craziness in her life. She's switching out of being an idol into television, and a lot of troubles ensue. There is a lot of commentary in this film on idol fandom behavior. And that's like one of the things that we really see in the ways that it connects to like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, is like the way that these industries chew these women up and spit them out. There's like so little protection, there's so little support, and it is so easy for them to lose themselves in these roles. It is so easy for fans to just see them in these very specific lenses rather than as real people with real human feelings and fears and concerns. And the thing with Perfect Blue in terms of like blurring that reality is she really starts to lose herself as she's working on this show, and as she has fans coming after her in like a stalker way, and also just in terms of attacking her as a person online. And yeah, just like the effect that this has on her mental health. And she has this break for sure. The way that it jumps around between, okay, is this really happening, or like, is this a scene on the show?
Yes,
or,
there's a wonderful blurring between Mima's life and then scenes in the show. It's just it's basically that moment in Inland Empire when Nikki dies, and then you see the microphone and everyone, yells cut and starts applauding. That could come right from, in fact, it seems to come
completely
right from Perfect Blue.
Yeah, there's a scene where there's this man that's been following her, and they're chasing each other through this set of the show, and it's like dark, and it feels kind of like this ghost town of a set, and it reminded me so much of the scenes in Inland Empire where they're running around on the dark set.
Absolutely.
And then when she finally potentially kills him, then we have that like cut, like, great take, guys.
Yes.
And it's like, what?
But like Nikki Grace, Mima can't wake up from that.
No, she can't tell what's real and what's not. And every time that you start to think, okay, this must be the reality, right? Then you get pulled right back out. It's like, cut. Oh, like, and then you start to recognize that, like another one of the characters on the show walks onto the screen, and you're like, oh my God, no, it's the show.
Yes.
Like you just genuinely can't tell sometimes.
Oh, it feels so Inland Empire to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course it came around 9 years before Inland Empire.
And there's like some doppelganger energy a bit.
Yes.
Because she starts seeing herself almost in like a different form. So that's another interesting thing too, because that one is a bit like sinister in how like false it feels.
Sure. So in Perfect Blue, Kon introduces these themes that he continues throughout his films and Paranoia Agent, which is just this kind of collective dream of cinema, of television, of fandom. And so we, the consumers who watch, who kind of are the fans, we're one part of that dream. But then there are the consumed, like Mima in this case, both as a pop idol and as an actress. She is performing for other people's dream. But then she also is the dreamer, because she loses herself in these roles that she's playing for the public. It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
This is like kind of early on in the film, she discovers that there is, because she hears fans calling it out to her. They're like, we love watching you in Mima's room. And she's like, what? Like, people are watching my room? And then she finds out it's this website where somebody has been basically making this online diary from her perspective. And it is clear that they have been stalking her. They mention things like where she gets her groceries and what she gets and things like that. And she's horrified. And this is unfortunately not unrealistic, especially nowadays. The big one is with like K-pop idols. There's so much that is really troubling when it comes to the fandom, because there's stalking, there are like death threats, because that's a big part of this movie too, is the idea of like falling off of this pedestal.
Yes.
That because these fans have created this vision of you, they are dreaming this version of you, and when you don't meet that, when you are just a human being, because a lot of the fans are disappointed that she's doing this show,
That she's switching into acting. Yeah.
and they turn on her and they come after her. And unfortunately, that's something that's absolutely really happening with a lot of K-pop idols. And a lot of them, like there is like a huge problem with them. Like some turn to suicide to get out of it because they feel like there's no escape from this vision that people have of them, so that they can't pursue a real life anymore.
Oh my goodness.
Which is so heartbreaking. But like, again, like that all comes back to like this vision that people come up with of them, that they cast upon them, that is not reality, but it's their reality.
You know, I didn't know anything about pop idol fandom until watching Perfect Blue and then thinking, oh, I need... Well, okay, the thing that alarmed me in Perfect Blue first, that made me think I needed to learn something, was that Mima is in a group at the beginning called Cham, and 3 young women dressed, how do we describe it? Almost like little fairy princesses without wings.
Little like poofy dresses.
Little poofy dresses, and they
Yeah.
sing this very, cutesy song.
Like very magical girl outfits almost.
Right, but then they pan to the audience, and where I was anticipating to see a bunch of adolescent girls, it's a bunch of middle-aged men
Yeah.
in the audience, and I was alarmed. And then watching some documentaries on pop idol fandom and things, I learned, oh, that's actually the norm.
Yeah.
That these teenaged pop idols tend to have an almost exclusively male older audience in Japan.
Right. And again, it's like, it's something where they're expected to produce a lot of fan service.
Right, right.
And-
They have to be accessible to the fans. And so they're this idealized version of a young girl. They dress very, very young. They sing these very lighthearted songs. And it is that the fans project onto them, but it's also a very specific industry.
Yeah.
You know,
They're molded to be
they're
this way.
molded to be this way.
There
and
are like schools that like train them essentially to be this, to look a certain way, act a certain way, dance a certain way.
and interact with fans in a certain way. They have to appear vulnerable and available
Yeah.
and cheerful. And men spend enormous amounts of money
Yeah.
on idol fandom. And so it's clearly a kind of dream that the fans are buying.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of articles and posts about like K-pop idols, men and women, because now like the boy bands are a big thing
Yes.
too. There's a huge issue where like, again, like talking about them being like vulnerable and available. If these idols are caught being in relationships,
Absolutely.
the fans completely turn on them and the partner, and like partners will receive like death threats, being told to stay away from them because these fans feel like they own this person.
Yeah, and they have to apologize publicly
Yeah.
for going on dates or
Yeah.
having boyfriends or girlfriends.
Yeah, or like drinking or smoking or things, anything that is outside of this childlike persona, this innocent persona that the
Right.
fans want to project on them.
And we see that happen with Mima when she chooses to leave pop idol fandom. She wants a more grown-up role, and so she becomes an actress. And certainly the scenes she's asked to play in the television drama are very adult.
Yes.
And then she's being photographed nude for a magazine. So she's kind of thrust into the adult world as a performer very abruptly.
Yeah, I think it is very different from, I would say, like American Hollywood culture.
Yes.
In ways, like we don't really have something on that scale when it comes to idols. But what I can see with that would be kind of like the equivalent of how people turn on child stars, like especially like Disney or Nickelodeon stars, when they're trying to break that persona that has been thrust upon them as these child stars.
The wholesome.
Yeah, like Miley
Yes.
Cyrus or like stuff like that,
Sure.
or like Lindsay Lohan. They got so much flack for trying to break out of that, and they don't know how. They don't know how to do that transition. So it seems really shocking to fans when they're suddenly like, I'm making adult music now. I'm an adult now. I'm going to do something sexy, you know.
I'm sorry, I just thought of JoJo Siwa. So
Yeah, no, I mean, but like honestly, it's like they want to do something that they're like, I have to do something that completely separates me from this past version of myself. And
Right.
Mima does that.
Yes.
And also, it's important to note that most of that is her following orders that she's given by people.
or not wanting to trouble people who have
Yeah.
given her an opportunity. She's like going along with things without really wondering if she's fully comfortable or not.
Right. Like, especially with like the photo shoots and stuff,
Yes.
and like some of the scenes that she has to do then for the show, it's like she doesn't know how to speak up because she is in this entirely new field and industry where she doesn't know the protocol. She's used to being an idol. She's used to being cared for in a particular way by like her handlers and her managers and stuff. And now that she's an actress, it's that there seems to be less protection, which again I would tie back to Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire.
Absolutely.
In the ways that we see that these women are just sort of thrust into situations where they don't have as much agency as, you know, we would hope they could.
Well, Betty at the beginning of Mulholland Drive could be pop idol Mima.
Yeah.
You know, just so cheerful and positive and sweet and almost childlike.
Yeah, she's got like an effervescence about her.
Right. Whereas, you know, obviously the Diane version
Yeah.
of that same character has been beaten down,
Yeah.
defeated, discouraged, chewed up and spit out.
Yeah.
And also we see in Mulholland Drive when Betty goes to the audition and that kind of smarmy actor is obviously taking advantage of his opportunity to be close to a beautiful younger woman.
Right.
So that situation of being a young actress, a young aspiring actress like Mima, who's put into compromising situations, but feels the necessity of going along with it.
Right.
Now, of course, in Mulholland Drive, Betty triumphs.
Yes. Yeah.
But so does Mima. She's considered a great success as an actress, and people are lauding her performances all over the place, even as Mima, is absolutely unraveling
Right.
as an individual person.
Well, and this also reminds me, I mean, because this is something that Kon definitely touches on in his work, that this theme of like how the industry affects women. And this is something we see a lot of in Millennium Actress as well. Our lead actress in that starts off very young. And one of the first interactions she has when she first gets on a set, she's confronted by this aspiring director that is like the general manager's nephew. And he's like on the set and he's like toying with her and being really weird and like coming on very strong. And we do see that like he ends up kind of like inserting himself into her life repeatedly. And Chioko like eventually does give in to him, even though she doesn't want to. It literally takes him like stealing something of hers so that she loses hope. And then she feels like she has to be with him, which is so upsetting.
Right.
And so that's just another way of, again, like talking about these types of interactions that especially like young aspiring actresses are thrust into situations where they are expected to, again, like that word available, like be this like vulnerable, available young woman if they want to get this role, if they want to get XYZ to move their career forward. And that just doesn't happen to men as much. I know that there are situations where that is probably happening, but it's so prevalent with women. And I'm glad that Lynch and Kon both address it. on a more thematic, going back to sort of like dreams and reality note with Millennium Actress, one of the big things we see with this, because so for listeners that haven't seen it, it is like a final interview with a famous actress. And as she's telling the stories, we jump back and forth between the present and her past and her film career. But it's done in a way where you are dropped in as she's talking about it.
And so does the interviewer.
Yes.
And
yeah.
and the person filming the interview.
Yeah. And the interviewer plays along. He's so excited because he's a super fan. Yeah. And the camera guy's just like, what's happening? And it's really funny. But it really plays with this, like, is it future? Is it past?
Or is it a film?
Or is it a film?
Yeah.
What's reality? What's filming? Like, is this the camera's rolling, or is this what's really happening? Because there's a lot of scenes where you can't tell if it's from a movie that she did or if it is part of her real life. Mm-hmm. And you'll start to think like, oh, this must be a scene from her life. And then they're like, oh, cut. Or like, you know, they're like, oh, Chiyoko, can you like re-say that? Can you say that in another way? Or, you know, it's just not really giving us the emotion we want or something. And you're like, wait, that's okay. I guess we're back in a movie now. Mm-hmm.
The integration between Chiyoko's in Millennium Actress, between her film self and her real self, seems a little more seamless and harmonious, though, than it does in Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
Where that split between Mima, the actress, and Mima, the pop idol, is very, very sharp and contentious.
Yeah.
They hate each other.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, there's a lot of, I think that's the big thing why we don't have as much to talk about with Millennium Actress compared to Perfect Blue is that...
And David Lynch.
Is because it's a really just like sweet, heartwarming film. It's like, I would say, we also don't have a lot to say about Tokyo Godfathers because that and Millennium Actress, I would say, are like Kon's version of the straight story. Mm-hmm. You know, they're like his heartwarming films. Well, heartwarming and heart-wrenching. There's like, you know, it's like tearful, but like in a beautiful way. Millennium Actress is one of my go-to films if I just need like a really cathartic cry. Yeah. And I did it in my rewatching of it. It was like the like chest hurting crying because it's so much about lost love as well. Sure. Actually, that's another thing that I'm just thinking of now that can kind of tie in, because a big part of the storytelling is that Chiyoko is also telling the story of a lost love. Yes. And there's a point where she breaks down crying because she realizes that she can't even remember his face. Mm-hmm. Like, he's just become this construct to her. He's more of a symbol than anything. They never, you know, get together, and she's just holding on to this image of him that she's projecting outwards of what he stands for in her life as like a placeholder in a lot of ways. As if she's
dreamed him.
Yeah, he's just a dream of someone. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's like, it's funny. That's like we've talked, listeners, about like that I do tarot and stuff, and like when I'm doing readings for people, I'll have them pull a card for themselves and a card for someone else to shuffle into the deck. And I'll say, like, you know, usually the traditional is like a romantic partner, but if you don't have one, I say, think of the dream of someone. Mm-hmm. And that's what she's holding on to. And she holds on to him physically through a key that he leaves her, which you pointed out has a lot of like Mulholland Drive vibes to it.
Because we never know what the key is for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she like she talks about repeatedly, like, because he gives her this key as sort of a safekeeping thing.
He says it opens the most important thing. Is that it?
Yeah, it's like the thing that is the most important.
Okay.
But we never find out what that thing is.
And she never finds out.
No, and she just keeps holding on to it and holding on to this dream of him. That's the thing that the director steals from her to finally force her to be with him.
Her key.
Yeah, because she's holding on to this dream of this guy by physically holding on to this key. She always keeps it on her, and he has someone steal it from her, and then they're like married, and she finds it while cleaning the house.
Right.
And it's this heart-wrenching scene where she's like,
You betrayed me.
Like, you just completely betrayed me. You did this because you knew that as long as I had it, I would just keep holding on to this dream of him and this dream of finding him and having that true love again.
And yet at the end, she admits that it's the chasing after him that she loves best.
Right.
That it was always about the chase.
Right. It's about the dream. It's about, again, that projection that she has of him. Like, they barely know each other. They meet in passing.
She's a little kid.
Right. And so it's like, if they had actually gotten together, who knows if they would have actually worked out or been happy together?
Probably not.
No. Yeah. It's like, how much do we actually know if they have anything in common? But because he's so absent, it is much easier for her to build this dream of him and turn him into, like, half the time it's like, is he even real at this point? Or is he just like a thought form? Is he like an artificial element or something?
Sure. Yeah.
Because she is just putting out this vision of him, and she blends him into characters in the movies that she plays.
Yes.
That's how she's able to give these performances, is because she's able to be like, what if I was talking about him? What if I was talking to him? But at the end of the day, she can't even remember what his face looks like.
She is the dreamer who dreams and then lives inside the dream.
Yeah, and she's able to pull people in with her because she is able to build up this fandom by pulling in the fans.
Well, she's a cinema star, so she is creating dreams for others to share in collectively. And certainly the creator of this documentary, who's there to interview her, is one of those people who's a willing dreamer.
Yeah, he's
of her dream,
in love with her, and when
he loves all her films.
And he's like so excited to be pulled into this dream with her. When she starts projecting them in a way that he's able to drop into them, it's like his peak fantasy. And like the camera guy is like points it out repeatedly. He's like, you're really losing yourself in this role. It seems like you've been like waiting a lifetime for this opportunity type of thing. And he's like, of course.
Right. Yeah, he's so excited to get to live in the dream with her.
Yeah.
And we just said we didn't see as many connections.
I know, it's one of those things where it's like, then you start talking about it.
How wonderful.
It's so, so wonderful. And then, again, like, I would say with Tokyo Godfathers, it's like, I really don't know if I see that many connections. It is just like a very sweet,
well, there is a wonderful trans woman
that is
character,
true.
like Denise Bryson.
Yeah. It's like, she is just... she fully has Hannah, like, she fully has her own agency. She's deeply loved, and she's a deeply loving person, and you build this deep attachment to her for sure.
And she's the hero.
Yes, she is the one that chooses repeatedly to be nurturing and protect the people around her,
and ultimately saves the baby in this beautiful moment of leaping off a building and catching a banner and floating. It's amazing.
I mean, it's so beautiful. And it's like, and that's the thing too, is it's like all she's ever wanted is to be a mom. And she goes out of her way to protect this child that she doesn't even know because she has so much love in her. And so, she's just portrayed as this deeply complex but loving individual with her own identity. And it's just so wonderful. Yeah. It's really so wonderful to see trans women portrayed in this way. I mean, it's because she's not a joke. She's someone who is surrounded by people who rely on her and love her and see her as a mother figure.
And yet she's not idealized.
No, she's a human being. She's a human being with flaws. But again, ultimately, she is the hero. She's the one that steps up and wants to repeatedly save this child.
And even at the end of Tokyo Godfathers, Hana is the one who delivers to her friend Jin this really direct monologue where she calls him out on all of his lies and fantasies and just speaks this very harsh truth to him. You know, she is dissolving the fantasy dream that he's had and forcing him to confront his reality. in order that he can resolve with his situation with his daughter.
Yeah.
And then, reunite and move forward. It's so powerful. She's like the truth teller in this world of dreams.
Right. Well, and the thing too is that, like, in that moment, she's then questioned of like, why would you come on so strong? And she references one of my favorite Japanese fairy tales of the red and the blue ogre, and it's this story, if you aren't familiar, listeners, of there's like these two monsters, and one of them wants to be with people and wants to relate to them and connect with them, and the other one, being a loving friend, basically throws themselves under the bus so that they can make it that the red ogre is like this hero, because like they're protecting the people from the blue ogre. And then ultimately the blue ogre has to leave, because if they were to stay, then the people would question it. And so it's like this story of loving people so much that like you would give up everything for them, and how heartbreaking that is. And Hana says that she sees herself in that way.
Yeah.
Like she's like, I am the blue ogre. I will do whatever it takes to make sure that the people around me are happy, even if it means that it hurts me. And it's so heartbreaking, because you're just like, Hana, I just want to hug you.
But that reunion of Jin and his daughter, and then of Miyuki at the very end, she's a runaway girl with her father. Boy, that spoke to me of Straight Story. This long journey through all these adventures and mishaps, only to be reunited with the people who you were closest to, who through a series of misunderstandings or mistakes you became estranged from. It's beautiful, like taking this long journey to what ultimately is closest to you.
Yeah, and just like the way that it, tackles like family dynamics and estranged family in general, because they all have familial troubles and stuff, and we get glimpses into each of their lives, and because the thing is that they're all unhoused, and they're all on the street, and so we look into their past of how did they get here, and how did they lose their family, and throughout the film they all find their way back to these families, and also find family within each other. So it's just like unbelievably heartwarming.
And it also shows a side of Tokyo that doesn't show up that often in film, or certainly in anime. And Kon said he was excited to show the kind of Tokyo that he saw all the time, just walking home from work or whatever, that doesn't show up in tourist brochures.
Right.
People who are marginalized, immigrants, unhoused people.
And showing the humanity of them.
Absolutely.
And they deserve just as much empathy and respect as you do.
Well, we're going to move on now to Paranoia Agent. Kon said when he made this television series, it's 13 episodes, that he had a lot of ideas left over from his films, and he was excited to find a way to kind of weave them into a television series. So it's a completely different approach to storytelling, and it appeared, as we said earlier, between Twin Peaks the original series and Twin Peaks The Return. It also happened to air on the same television network in Japan that broadcast Twin Peaks. So at its most essential, kind of basic plotline, Paranoia Agent is the story of an investigation of a serial attacker. This figure of what's called in English Lil Slugger. In Japanese, it's Shonen Bato, which is like Bat Boy. He appears on golden rollerblades. He's wielding a baseball bat, which is slightly bent, and
also golden.
And he appears out of nowhere and just takes people down in the street with it. It begins with this young artist, Tsukiku Sagi, who is the creator of a cute little mascot named Maromi. She's under pressure to create another character, really feeling the heat from her studio, and Lil Slugger appears and knocks her down in the street. He then starts taking down other people, and the story begins to focus on the investigation, trying to figure out his identity, find a pattern in his attacks. Very Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
He's not killing people yet at the beginning. But about halfway through the series, it takes a dramatic turn. And it goes from being kind of an ordinary crime drama to being something quite surreal.
Which is something that people point out with Twin Peaks a lot, where it starts off normal and then it starts to get supernatural and paranormal.
Right. Yeah. And we think we've solved the case about halfway through. They arrest someone who more or less admits to the crimes, but that doesn't end it.
Well, and the thing is that they start to notice that the pattern of the victims is that, because they're like, well, why is he attacking these people at random? Like, what is the connection between any of these people? And it's that the cop that is essentially our Dale Cooper, Maniwa, he starts to notice this pattern that it is people who feel cornered or they feel like they're in a tough situation and they don't know how to get out. That's like what seems to summon him. And that's when you start to realize that this is not a normal human being. This isn't just somebody who's attacking people randomly on the street, because then it's like, well, how would he know that these people are in like psychic distress, basically? And Maniwa becomes obsessed with it and starts to really lose himself in it in the way that Cooper does as well.
Right.
He just like, the more that he starts to unravel the mystery of it, the more he just completely loses himself in it.
Well, another wonderful parallel between Twin Peaks and Paranoia Agent is the villain. Lil Slugger is such a Bob figure.
Yeah.
In that he's so hard to define. He's got a supernatural kind of element, and he appears to be fed by people's fear and paranoia.
Yeah, he's an entity. He's not someone that they can just physically grab off the street, per se.
Sure.
It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, and he starts off as just an elementary school boy.
Yeah.
Who's whacking people with his bat, but he grows to have this enormous power that he is murdering people by halfway through the series, brutally murdering people with his bat. And toward the end of the series, he's grown to a complete monster.
Yeah, he's like gigantic.
He's massive.
And looks unlike a little boy anymore. He just looks like a monster.
And what becomes clear is that he is being fed, in a sense, like an egregore, right? An egregore is like an entity that's created by a kind of collective imagination. So individuals thinking about and fearing this entity put that energy out there, and it creates it. So the people of Tokyo are afraid of Lil Slugger. They're gossiping about him. Well, I heard he did this, and I heard he did this. And so he just keeps gaining power because of people's imagination, because of the dream.
Yeah, they're
People are
manifesting
dreaming
him to be this way. It's like the more that they come up with these like fake stories, the more that they just add to this creation of him and turn him into something else, so that he gets so much bigger and unmanageable and more dangerous.
But just like all of these dreams, all of these fantasies, Lil Slugger is filling a need. It becomes really clear that people want him to be real because they want to blame him for things. These housewives are standing around gossiping and blaming him for the suicide of one of their neighbors, blaming him for a young wife killing her mother-in-law. Oh, Lil Slugger did it.
Yeah, he becomes an easy scapegoat for anything that could possibly go wrong. And in this way, again, like they're just building him up into an even sturdier reality, whether they don't, I was about to say whether they realize it or not, but they don't realize it.
They're projecting all of their wrongs, basically, onto this entity, this egregore. It reminds me in some ways of the way the characters talk about Bob as the evil that men do, as opposed to saying an evil man has done evil things to harm people.
Right.
The evil that men do is a separate entity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so much easier if we separate it that way.
If we externalize it.
It's much easier if we don't have to take on the blame ourselves, if we can blame something else, especially if we can blame like a weird entity or something.
Well, and then ultimately the defeat of Lil Slugger comes by someone speaking truth to him. And that's the chief detective Ikari's wife, who has a confrontation with him where he almost murders her. He gets enormously huge, and she defeats him by just speaking the truth, by refusing to indulge in fantasy or self-delusion.
And it's so brave too, because she's like a sickly woman, she's dying, and she calls him to her. Because again, like she has figured it out and she knows how to draw him to her. Because again, it's this idea of like feeling cornered, feeling troubled and stuff. So he comes to her and she's like, I called you to me. Like I put out this feeling that like I felt cornered and stuff, and I drew you to me, and you're going to sit and you're going to listen to what I have to say about what I think about you.
And what you really are. And she basically tells him, you know, you aren't real. You're no different than that dog, Moromi. And she, you know, Moromi, this cute, big-eyed mascot, is on television at the time. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, too, that we find that they are both things that have come into existence because of Tsukiko.
Yes, she has created them both originally.
Yeah. But then it's like she's got so she is like a very interesting character, because it's like there is obviously something special about Tsukiko, that she is able to at least get these thought forms kind of going. Like she gets them like kind of kickstarted. She like plants the seed, and then people will build from there and build them up bigger and bigger. But there's something special about her being able to be the one that starts that fire.
I agree with you. And yet she's such a quiet, unassuming, frightened young woman. Like she doesn't know the kind of power that she has over people to create these characters or entities that just spark people's imaginations and start wildfires.
Well, and the thing is that like the detectives almost notice it about her. And when they confront her about it in the beginning, they're like, we think that you have something to do with this. We think that you are somehow responsible for this attack on you. And when you're watching it for the first time, you're kind of like, what is wrong with these guys? Why would you say something like that to like a victim of an assault? And then by the end, you're like, oh my God, they were onto something.
Yeah, it's like Sagi is the dreamer, but doesn't realize it.
Right. Because that's the thing, is like she's not an evil person.
Oh my goodness.
She's like deeply troubled. And when she is confronted with the truth of things and her own culpability in all of this, it's like devastating for her.
It's like she begins as the dreamer, but then everyone else picks up on the dream and adds to it.
Yeah.
So I guess Paranoia Agent would ask that question too. You know, we are like the dreamer who dreams and lives inside the dream, but who is the dreamer?
Right.
It does kind of start out as her, but then everyone else feeds the dream.
Right.
And just like in Paprika, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it becomes the collective dream.
Right.
The dreams are merging and coming up with their own power. Then we have no one dreamer anymore. It is the collective unconscious that's dreaming it. And we have the negative version with Lil Slugger, and we have the positive, or at least superficially positive, sweet version with Moromi.
Well, and actually, I would question you on that, because a thing that I feel like I came back to in terms of talking about how they're the same thing, I kept thinking about how at the end of the day, the original iteration of Lil Slugger isn't even necessarily negative, because the reason why he was created was as a scapegoat for Tsukiko, because she was irresponsible when she was a child, and she wasn't paying attention to her dog, and her dog got hit by a car. The dog was Moromi. And so she came up with this lie to tell her dad, where she was like, this boy came and he had roller skates and he hit him. He killed Moromi and attacked me. And so he and Moromi are just different entities that are both protecting Tsukiko in different ways, because the whole reason of why he attacks her in the first place is because she's feeling cornered, she's feeling overwhelmed at work, she needs an excuse to take a break from work. And so here comes her old scapegoat, her old artificial element, and this is what happens. I think that it reminded me a lot of the discussion we had over psychic self-defense, of the ways that women in distress can call angels,
the guardian angel
to them, and how we talked about with Laura's angel, and how potentially Coop is that as well. And so for me, I was looking at this as like, this is her version of that. She was a young girl in distress, and she called her dog back to her through a comforting cartoon character, and she called this scapegoat protector to her.
Well, that really works, because Maniwa notices that all of the victims, at least in the early stages, are relieved when they're attacked by Lil Slugger.
Because that's the thing, is that he gets them out of these situations. He's the excuse. His purpose is to be an excuse, to be a scapegoat, to be somebody to blame.
To give you a rest. And the creepy connection with that is when they are making the television show of Moromi called Mellow Moromi.
Yeah.
The thing Moromi keeps repeating is, take a rest, take a rest.
Yeah.
So again, it's exactly what you said about Lil Slugger.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. It's just that they are presented
one
differently.
Is cute.
Yes, one is cute and one is creepy and scary, but they have the same goal. So when they keep saying they're one and the same, they're one and the same, they're the same thing, they really are. It's just different faces, but the same purpose.
Yeah.
It's the same purpose of like they are trying to be there for Tsukiko.
And then for everyone, they are a comfort, but not a wholesome comfort.
No, because even with Moromi, it gets obsessive.
Right.
It's like there's scenes of people like trying to like break down doors at stores, being like, what do you mean you're sold out of Moromi plushes? What do you mean you're out of Moromi? Like they're like, I need this comfort, I need this. And they're like manic, they're crazed.
Right.
And I mean, like, we do see that in a way in like real society with like how like mascots like that are, where it's like a lot of people find deep comfort in like Hello Kitty. We bonded over a love of Moomin.
We love Moomin.
We love Moomin so much. Everything I own is Moomin. I love Moomin. And like, Moomin is my escape when I'm like, I need something mellow. I need something to make me feel safe. And that's the thing too, is that the like physical entity of Moromi that Tsukiko has created, like when she's having moments of like there's like one scene where she is just like sitting and she's like kind of disassociating, and the like Moromi plush she carries around like comes to life and like crawls out of her bag and like teeters around in this very cute way and is like, it's okay,
it's not
Tsukiko.
your fault,
it's not your fault,
right?
And again, like it's all meant to just like comfort her,
but also control her.
Yeah, it keeps her complacent, and it keeps her feeding into them as well.
Right. You know, despite how cute Moromi is, there is a massive, business behind Moromi, and we know that from the first episode.
Right.
Real big money is at stake.
Yeah, which
on
is
these
why she's on the
characters.
deadline, is because her bosses are like, we need another character. We need more money.
Right. And then in the episode called Mellow Moromi, where they're making this Moromi cartoon, it's so meta because Moromi is narrating what all these different people's jobs are, and they're all under incredible pressure.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolute. And Lil Slugger comes and slaughters all of them because they're all cornered. And so the product is this completely innocent, silly TV show. But, so much blood has been spilled, so much anxiety to produce it. That's the backstory of the dream.
Yeah.
The dream industry is this brutal machine that, as we've said numerous times this episode and throughout, just turns up people and spits them out.
Right.
And the product is this lovely fantasy for all of us to consume.
Yeah.
But the producers of the dream really suffer.
Yeah.
I heard that originally Kon wanted that to be live action and animation.
Oh,
he wanted
my gosh,
the
that
actual
would be
people
crazy.
on his team to be in that.
Oh my
I know, but it was just too expensive, too complicated. to do.
But I mean, it totally tracks for
Yeah,
him.
it sounds
I
like
could
Opus.
picture- Yes, yeah. No, I mean, seriously.
Some other really wonderful ways that this show overlaps with Twin Peaks. For one, we have the woman and her doppelganger, kind of the split person.
Yeah.
Harumi is a mild-mannered research assistant by day and a sex worker named Maria by night.
Yeah, but they're completely separated.
Completely separated, they communicate via answering machine.
And it's hostile.
Yeah,
they hate each
They
other.
hate each other. And we don't know who the, quote, real one is.
Yeah.
Is she Maria or is she, the research assistant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see that certainly in Lara.
Yeah.
Kind of different versions of Lara. It puts me in mind even of Renee and Alice in Lost Highway.
Yeah.
Two versions of the same woman at odds with each other.
Right.
Yeah. Or Diane and Betty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we see that play out a lot in Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing, too, that's interesting about Paranoia Agent is that most of the episodes, at least especially the first couple ones, all focus on different characters as we're being introduced
wonderful.
to them. And
they're all interrelated characters, but we
yes.
kind of get a deep dive into each one's situation or story.
Yeah, and they all have, these different reasons for calling Little Slugger to them. And yeah, in her case, it's the fact that she is at odds with her doppelganger, essentially, this other side of herself, this split personality, and she doesn't know how to make it stop. There's a point where she thinks she's beat it, and she thinks that she's cast her out, and she clears out her closet of all of her sex worker outfits and all of her makeup and everything, and then it's all right back, and she's leaves a message you thought you could get rid of me. Yeah, it's very antagonistic between them.
And just like in Mulholland Drive, where Betty hears Diane's voice on the answering machine.
Yeah. Talking about some of the other episodes as well, there's also one that's really difficult that I see a lot of Laura and Leland in. There's this episode about this girl, Taiko, and how she is a daddy's girl and loves her father so much, but they've become estranged. And we ultimately see that it's because she finds these, files on his computer of her changing, and he has hidden this camera in her room to watch her change. And it is this heart-wrenching, deeply upsetting scene where she's scraping around trying to find the camera, and she's, as this is happening, you're watching her lose all of this faith that she had in her father.
Her anchor.
This person that she deeply adored. And it reminded me so much of the scenes in Fire Walk with Me, where Laura comes to the realization that it's Leland.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, not you. And that's it's the same kind of emotion that we see when Taiko finds it. She's like, no, 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 not my dad. No, why would he do this? Because I mean, it just shatters all of the visions that they had of who their fathers were, and then makes them, of course, feel deeply unsafe. Like, how do you go back into your home then knowing that? How do you feel safe at home knowing that? You don't. That's the answer.
You realize what you thought was reality was a dream.
Yeah.
And now you are awake in the terrifying reality, faced with the knowledge of what the father is, which is a predator.
Yeah, well, it's like with Laura when she is like, who are you? Who are you? When Bob is trying to attack her and she sees Leland's face. It's like, this moment of like breaking through this dream that's sort of masking the reality. And when you do break through, then you can't unsee it, and then you have to figure out where to go from there, and it's very hard.
And on the father's side of this, his fantasy projection is that he's a good dad. He's a family man. He has convinced other people of this about himself, that he's just this, wholesome family man. And then we see that he's involved in organized crime, all sorts of horrible things. And, is patronizing sex workers and asking them to call him daddy.
Right, which is very Leland.
The depth of his corruption is really deep and disturbing.
Yeah, well, it's like with Teresa Banks, him being like, you look like my Laura.
Right, exactly. But he's projecting this dream, this fantasy of being the good man that others kind of see and accept about him, including his own daughter.
Right.
And she perhaps has, aside from those who are killed by Little Slugger, the most devastating impact, that she's left brain damaged and unaware of who he is or who she is after Little Slugger's attack.
It's a very difficult episode, for sure.
Another wonderful way that the series perhaps almost is an homage to Twin Peaks is that it has its own version of the Log Lady intros. And it has, at the end of each episode, what's called a prophetic vision. And an old man looks directly at the viewer and uses very Margaret Lanternman type terms to give us a hint about what's coming in the next episode. So just as the Log Lady intros were to introduce each episode, it's as if the episode ends with this introduction to the next one. I love them. And the last one in particular sounds so Twin Peaks. The last of the prophetic visions says, "To begin, the story that seems to have ended spins back to the place where it began. Following each stepping stone and connecting the dots, you find the eternal castle of recurring dreams. No mystery remains unsolved forever, and no answer is without mystery. Well then, we bid you farewell." And that's how Paranoia Agent ends, and I feel that Twin Peaks could end that way too.
Yeah, and the other thing that was like a huge mind-blowing moment for me.
And me.
Was that, so throughout the show, we see Maniwa completely like deteriorate.
And he's our like Dale Cooper figure.
Yes, he's our Dale Cooper, and he loses himself so much in this pursuit of finding the truth and bringing Lil Slugger down. And we like watch him as the episodes progress. He becomes more and more like disheveled. He's like starting to really let himself go. Like he's like not shaving. His hair is growing long. And then at the end of that last episode, we get a scene where earlier in the show we had seen the old man, the prophet, doing these like math problems,
equations, some very long, complicated equation.
Yeah, with chalk, and we see that again. But then when we get closer up, we see it is the face of Maniwa, but his hair has gone white. But like his hair has gone white because of what all of this has done to him. And also, at a point in the show, the old man dies. And so there has to be a new prophet. And as Maniwa has as he's lost himself in this case, he has also opened himself up to the supernatural and the paranormal and the spiritual. He's become a very, very open vessel to it, and it has taken that opportunity. And so then when we have that final prophetic vision, it is delivered by Maniwa, but again with white hair.
And in his voice.
It's in his
Yeah,
voice.
it's the only one that's not that same old man
Yeah.
every time. What an absolutely wonderful and haunting way to end.
Well, and it's
the
very
series.
for quartets, because it's like he's been
Yes.
really humbled by this. Obviously, it's ravaged his body.
Well, his partner does something very Twin Peaksy also.
Yeah.
Where he retreats into nostalgia.
Yeah.
This is the detective Ikari. They've both been fired after the person they arrested under suspicion of being Lil Slugger has been either murdered or has committed suicide. Murdered by Lil Slugger.
Yeah.
And he's working as a security guard. He meets up with this robber he once arrested, who also is working as a security guard, and they kind of have a drink and exchange tales. And Ikari says, oh, you know, I never wanted to be this kind of police officer. I wanted to be the one chasing the robber with the burlap sack. You know, like as in an old movie almost.
Or like a cartoon.
Yeah. And then when he steps out of the bar, he's in a two-dimensional, like, kind of mid-century Japan. And there he's just so comfortable and happy in this complete delusion.
Well, and Moromi ends up taking Tsukiko there
Yes.
to hide from reality.
Yeah. And I think that Moromi tells her it's his dream.
Yeah. Yeah. And like he is the dreamer. And Moromi's like, it's okay, we can hide here. And even like Moromi inserts Tsukiko as his daughter, the daughter he never had. That's when his wife is like taking on Lil Slugger, and then she has to be the one to break into his dream to force him to wake up and force him to come back to reality.
Well, and so often in the original series, we have this kind of warm nostalgia for another era of American life. And you know, certainly in Twin Peaks: The Return, people were feeling that nostalgia for the original series. And so to see Paranoia Agent engage directly with that feeling of that desire to lose oneself in nostalgia for an era that you felt you belonged in.
Right. Even if it's
yeah.
false.
Right.
Even if it's completely constructed. And because it's so clear that it is. It's not like he just, you know, lands in this world that looks exactly like his own, but like old fashioned or something. I mean, it is quite literally, it makes it clear that it is like, it's like a paper cut.
Yes.
Like the style is even different. His animation style stands out amongst the rest of this world.
Right. Yeah, for sure. He is the dreamer.
Yeah,
there.
he's the dreamer, and he is moving through the world as a creator, not a part of it. And speaking of creators moving in through their own world, I think that this is like a good chance to kind of circle back, if we're talking chronologically. We're going to be jumping back a little bit back to Opus, though, his manga. So it follows this mangaka, Nagai, who has this very popular manga resonance, and he ends up getting sucked into it as he's struggling to come up with an ending for it. He's deciding that he's going to have to kill off one of the main characters, and that character does not agree and ends up pulling him into the manga, and it becomes this very meta conversation of like, why do you think that you have the power to decide who lives and dies? And, you know, it's like, what is reality? What is created? Who is the dreamer / creator? And as I said earlier, this like especially ties in if you have that lost final chapter where Kon even inserts himself. The chapter is that then we see Kon, and then Nagai comes out and is like, hey man, what are you writing? Why are you writing this? But a big thing for me is that Nagai's love for Satoko, who is the main character of his manga, reminds me a lot of David's love for Laura, because he wanted to make Fire walk with me to give Laura more.
Right.
He did it out of love for Laura and wanting to tell her story. And that's the way that's how you feel about Nagai and Satoko.
Yeah.
As you're reading it, you can see that he loves her so much, and she's so dear to him. And there's this really heartbreaking point where she's asking him, she says, "Does the story have to be so sad?" And he says, "Well, I have to keep it interesting." And she says, "Is that why we die? It would be boring if we were all just happy. And so you torture us." But then when there's like a point where she's in danger and he pulls her out of the manga into the real world to get her out of a dangerous situation. And then when she's walking around in our world and our reality, well, though, is it ours?
Yes.
Then we see that there is Satoshi Kon, so then that's the realist reality. How deep does it go? But she's walking around, and you have one of those kind of classic scenes where she's like walking past like a TV store or something and sees the news, and she sees all these, it's like disasters and crime and all of these things. And then she has this like epiphany moment where she says, "Is this all real? What a horrible world." She like comes to terms with like, oh, so he has been making this, fantasy world that is my life, and I thought was so terrible and filled with all of these painful moments and terrible things that have happened to me. But actually, he's just mirroring what is happening in the real world, in his world. Like, if this is the real world, actually, like, no wonder he's writing these types of stories. And she kind of, eases up on him after that, after realizing that he is just writing and drawing what he's seeing. And then, then there's the conversations of like, well, what about his God? Isn't that higher God also cruel then? Yeah, when she realizes that he's mirroring that darkness, it's this really powerful moment. And I think that reading those scenes, I can't help but see a lot of Laura and David in that, and think about, what if Laura could come to life in a way and talk with David, and what would she have to say to him if she realized, well, my life is just a construction by this man.
Right.
And because again, like, there's a lot of dialogue surrounding people who are uncomfortable with David's work and find it really troubling, and they're like, why would he make something like this? And it's like, well, a lot of the things that he's portraying, a lot of the things that are like difficult scenes are like, unfortunately, some of the most real scenes where it's like, that is stuff that happens in the world. Unfortunately, like with Laura, there are daughters who are being preyed upon by their fathers.
Absolutely.
But Satoko and Nagai have a lot of good conversations, I think, about like how he's like, now I don't know how to end this series actually, because every time I try to write something up, I don't like it because I don't want to hurt you. Now that I know you and I'm talking to you and stuff, like, I already cared about you so much, but now that you are tangible and you're in front of me, how could I kill you? How could I hurt you? How could, as a writer myself too, like, it would be deeply troubling to be confronted by my own characters.
Right.
And I think that we talk about, Lynch was aware of Kon's work, and I would have been deeply fascinated if Lynch had read Opus and what his thoughts would have been, perhaps, on that kind of concept of like, what kind of conversations would he have with them. And we do actually have, there was that one, the interviews he did,
David Lynch interviewing the Palmer family.
And like, that's kind of the closest
Very
we
meta.
get.
Yeah.
And like, but we do see when he's talking to Laura, the overflowing, I mean, it is like glowing out of him. He's like radiating love for her. You can see how protective he is of her and how much he loves her. And that's kind of his Opus moment. I feel like he's confronting the villain, he's confronting his heroine, and it's a lot to take in, and it's very meta. And again, it's bringing up that constant question of what reality is. How deep does this go? How far does it go? Who is the ultimate dreamer?
I mean, in our real life, in our society.
Is this real life? Hilary? I don't know. After binge consuming a bunch of Satoshi Kon and David Lynch, I don't know. I honestly, I'm not sure.
Well, one wonderful thing you brought up there describing Satoko's experience with, quote, the real world, is I think it brings to light a lot of what is an undercurrent in Satoshi Kon and even in David Lynch, which is, what is the reason for the dream?
Yeah.
Why do we need characters like Moromi? Why do we need idol fandom, film, all of it? And it does seem that, well, the reason that we need to escape is just right there in front of us in Satoshi Kon. I even think of that moment in Perfect Blue early on when Mima is taking down her Cham poster, preparing for her transition. And just in the background on the television is news of an earthquake and 200 people are dead and many more maybe. And she doesn't even pay attention to it. She's not even registering to it. And the constant drumbeat of disasters and troubles that are so much bigger than our individual lives seems to necessitate a fantasy, a dream.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, it's like, that's the thing is like when Satoko is like watching the real news, I'm doing finger air quotes right now, listeners, but like when she's watching the like real news, she's just like, whoa, this is actually maybe even worse. And there's a point where the villain of her world, which is this like cult leader with psychic powers, this is like the big bad in the manga, he confronts Nagai and says, it's because you want control. Because he's psychic, he like gets into Nagai's head, looks through his past, and it pulls up all these images of times where he was out of control, where he was bullied, where he was, abused or silenced in different ways. And the mask, this leader is like, you want control. That's why you created this world, is you wanted to have a world that you could control, where you could decide what happened, because in your own life you didn't have that.
So we dream the dream and then live in the dream because it is a thing we can control. We cannot control the horrible reality just outside our door, but we can control our tiny little space. And whether that revolves around a pop idol or a mascot or a fiction that we've told ourselves, it serves the same purpose.
Yeah. And I mean, and the thing is, like, Cohen making this kind of work, this piece of work where it is about, a creator being confronted by their characters and having the characters say that to the creator. It is essentially that he's putting this in, saying it to himself as well,
right.
Or at least we can infer that. And oof,
yeah,
I don't know if I have the bravery to do that to myself. So I just have to, respect and admire it.
I think at the very bottom of the need for the fantasy for both Satoshi Kon and for David Lynch is the creation of the atom bomb.
Yeah.
And the existence of the atom bomb. So we certainly see that. And we're going to have a lot more to say about that in a future episode on atomic culture in David Lynch. But we kind of see that as an undercurrent in so many things. And it's certainly an underlying answer in Japanese cinema generally. One of Paranoia Agent's opening theme song's recurring lines is, quote, a magnificent mushroom cloud in the sky.
Yeah.
And another is something like, you don't worry about the tsunami. Confronting the horror of the likelihood of nuclear annihilation is just too great for human consciousness. It's so much different than confronting our own individual mortality.
Right.
we're contemplating the non-existence of everything that we understand as reality. So when we kind of confront our own mortality, we think about leaving a legacy or what will be left behind after us. But nuclear annihilation means nothing will be left behind. I just don't think it's a horror that we can reconcile, you know? So we just dream instead, you know? Also, it's big business. The dream makes people a lot of money, as we addressed before. You know, capitalism is a driving force behind the modern mind's preoccupation with fantasy and dream. This dream factory produces dreams, and its profits depend on our willingness to consume those dreams as frequently as possible. The more we consume, the more we forget there is anything but a life of consumption.
Yeah, and we see that with, again, going back to Moromi, there's all these scenes of people busting down doors of stores that have big signs saying, like, we're sold out, sorry. You know, and they're like, no, I need Moromi. I need a Moromi plush right now to keep myself sane, essentially. And I think that that's unfortunately very relatable. Like, I mean, when it feels so unbelievably bleak like that, capitalism has forced us to believe that the way to cheer ourselves up is with like a little treat.
Yes.
Can I recognize that it's capitalism and still do it? Yes, I do it every day.
Well, you know, even to get meta ourselves, here we are talking about our favorite show and our favorite director. We are part of fandom.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And also Dale Cooper would encourage us to have a little treat.
And I'm looking around your apartment at many Twin Peaks artifacts around here. Isn't your Wi-Fi named the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, it is.
And I love to do this too. I love to collect objects that were used in Twin Peaks. Not the actual props, but, you know, another version of that same object. And I have all over my house these little collections of like, oh, these are all my Diane Tulpa things, or you know, here's my little cookie jar from the Joneses' house in the Return. And looking at those physical objects after watching Satoshi Kon and thinking about this topic so intensely over the last few weeks, I've been looking at my own self and my own collections and wondering about this. It's like I want to make the dream tangible in my own space.
Yeah.
There's like such deep comfort and fun in seeing those things and kind of handling them. It's hard to describe, and I'm not uncomfortable with it. Yeah. But I also recognize it as perhaps a kind of distraction.
Right. Well, I mean,
though a very necessary one.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was like literally last night I was showing someone that in my room I have this like big kind of curiosities area that is very much inspired by growing up watching the Czechoslovakian like Jan Svankmajer Alice and just like losing myself in it.
Yeah.
And that was an escape for me. Alice in Wonderland was a huge escape for me as a child, and I wanted to build a life around that. I wanted living on my own now and being able to decorate my home however I want. It's like, yes, I will buy these things or find these things and collect them that make me feel like I am in a movie that makes me feel safe and comforted and nostalgic. Yes. I will get these things and decorate my space in such a way that I can pretend even for a little bit that I'm in this imaginary world that I love. People have their ways of escaping. They have their ways of, you know, getting into these mind sets to get themselves out of situations, whatever that looks like for them. And we see so much of it in the work of David Lynch and so much of it in the work of Satoshi Kon, where these people are building out these fantasy worlds to run away into.
And maybe that's human nature, and maybe that human nature has been, in a sense, preyed upon by 20th century and beyond capitalism as a way of enriching itself. You know, that it it takes our kind of tendency to dream and commodifies it, makes it something that it can sell us.
Right. Yes.
And that's one thing I love at the very beginning of Paprika. So if we're going to transition to our final text from Satoshi Kon.
The final chapter.
The final chapter. that Paprika at the very beginning, she is the dream girl. Yeah. And she's able to move in and out of her patient's dreams. But she also moves in and out of films.
Yeah. And ads.
And advertising. At the very beginning, I love watching her kind of fade into ads. And that sparked me thinking, like, is advertising a kind of collective dream?
Oh, definitely.
You know, that it's a language that we all speak. And I remembered the line from Mad Men when Don Draper says to a woman, like, what you call love is something guys like me invented to sell nylons. The idea that our world, our kind of collective imagination as 20th century Americans and beyond has been shaped so heavily by advertising. We don't know where the line between our own imagination and the imagination that's been fed to us, you know, where is that line between those?
Well,
is there
holidays are like that too. Like, I work in a card shop where, like, we sell cards that exist mostly because Hallmark pushes them as much as they do. Like, they've turned it into an industry of, like, you must buy cards and gifts for these people on these occasions because you have to, or you're a bad person. I know I had mentioned to you the other day that I've been following this one YouTuber who's really into manifestation and things like that. And she talks about how she sees a lot of, like, egregore energy in the way that social media works to sell us things. The ways that, like, influencers are selling us things, telling us that we want these things. And the more that they get people saying, this product is so good, then the more you believe it.
Run,
and the
don't
more
walk.
And the more people want to buy it. And then the next thing you know, it is a best-selling product.
Right.
Because we have spoken it into existence. We have made people believe that it is.
We have promoted the collective dream.
Yeah.
And other people have fed it then with their kind of energies. Yeah, like Lil Slugger.
Yeah. And the way that we idolize influencers or, you know, social media celebrities, and then they do end up getting, like, a whole celebrity status built out of that. Like, now there's TikTokers who are going to, like, movie premieres and, like, award shows and stuff, and there's so much commentary online about it, and we just keep feeding into it and building it out.
Yeah, the idea of fame as a kind of collective dream.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's nothing else but that.
Right. And advertisement is, like, a huge way of doing that. I mean, even, like, in the way that, like, you know, advertisements often do use, like, celebrities and stuff. And nowadays, the biggest advertisers are, like, influencers, like social media celebrities, not necessarily just, you know, like, actresses or pop stars or stuff.
That makes perfect sense.
And maybe it can even be Paprika. It can be a complete dream construct.
But yet in the film Paprika, we see a resolution of a lot of the themes that Kon has, the very Lynchian themes that Kon has been exploring throughout his career. And I mean, Paprika still embraces the whole, you know, we live inside a dream and the split self and all of this, but in a different way.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of seeing Paprika in theaters at a local movie theater, Row House. There's a scene that is in a movie theater and they're, like, watching themselves in this movie, and it's very meta. And then I was in the theater watching this scene where they're in a theater watching, and I was just like, I had this kind of moment of just like, whoa, this
so
feels
cool.
crazy.
Is that the one where Paprika shouts encore? Oh, yeah, love that.
So good.
Well, what I think is so wonderful, many things. I love Paprika, but this idea that the dream can be destructive. So the collective dream, that's the parade.
Yeah.
That feels very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's sucking people in and kind of deluding them. And then where is this dream heading? Nowhere good.
Right.
But at the same time, in the same film, Paprika is showing how, Paprika the therapist, is showing how dreams can be used for healing.
Right. I mean, that's her purpose, really. That's the whole purpose of the DC Mini, is that it was meant to be able to help you like analyze your dreams and work through them and stuff. It was not meant to be used for evil.
Yeah, and but so much of Satoshi Kon's work, we see the dream, the fantasy as dangerous.
Yeah.
As potentially causing a loss of self or a split of self or a disconnect from reality, or it's a distraction from reality.
Yeah.
But in Paprika, he seems to take a much more nuanced approach to it, where yes, the dream can be incredibly destructive and dangerous, and it can also be therapeutic and healing. It isn't the dream that's the problem.
Right.
It's who's using it or how it's being used.
Right.
So that kind of collective dream, the parade, which is ultimately being controlled by the chairman, that's destructive and dangerous.
Yeah.
But Paprika is able to use dreams in a really positive way. I feel as though that's something that comes through very strongly in Inland Empire. When we look at the lost girl, the lost girl is just watching this screen.
Right.
She's kind of consuming these projected dreams here that Nikki is producing as an actor.
Right.
And through some sort of process, that consumption of the dream or that exposure to the dream saves her.
Yeah.
The lost girl by the end is saved, is found, is redeemed. So we don't see her really doing anything else but crying at the television. Is it saying something similar to Satoshi Kon in Paprika, that there is a therapy in this, potentially, the engagement with the dream?
Well, obviously, this is a world where you can be viewing dreams and really processing them and stuff, and inserting yourself in as a therapist to help navigate and stuff. But, what we have in our reality is therapy, like generally just like talking through your dreams with a therapist, because it is the subconscious. We're presented with these images by our subconscious that is saying, hey, I'm trying to work through these thoughts and feelings, and here's what I came up with. And it's, often very chaotic and weird. And that's why we have to analyze them. That's why there's so much study around analyzing dreams.
Sure.
Is because there's so many ways to take them.
But I love how in Paprika, she's just as interested in, say, the detective's dreams as she is in films.
Yeah.
And she really wants to encourage him to kind of enjoy film almost as a way of therapy. And so even when she's watching his dream on the screen in that scene you were describing, seeing in the theater, and, she's cheering him on from the audience of a movie, like equating kind of the personal dream with the collective dream of cinema, and seeing both as a force for healing. Is really a strong message of, I think, both, in a sense, Inland Empire and Paprika.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that goes back to something we talk about a lot with Lynch, is that it's that balance between the light and the dark.
Yeah.
It's the balance between the hurting and the healing. And it's a very careful balance. And I would say that with Kon's work, there is often that shining thread of hope.
Definitely
throughout.
in Paprika.
Yeah, especially in Paprika.
I love how in Paprika, too, there is this unity between the split selves.
Yeah.
So Dr. Chiba and Paprika are the same person, different sides of the same person. And at one point they have this confrontation where they say to each other, like, who is in control? Why do you assume you are in control of me? Maybe I am in control of you. Dr. Chiba, Paprika, essentially asking herself, which of us is the dreamer here? Which of us is the real person? And the truth is that they are both the real person.
Yeah.
And they help each other, and they are united.
Right.
It's just after that Paprika sees Dr. Chiba kind of admitting to herself her feelings for Tokita, and she says, oh, she's being true to herself. Like, she's so proud of her, you know, even after they've had this kind of contentious conversation.
But overall, they are a team. It's, you know, in comparison to Paranoia Agent.
Or Perfect Blue.
Where we see these, you know, split personalities where it's entirely antagonistic, and they are completely at odds with each other. It's refreshing to see they're working hand in hand, and like that doesn't necessarily mean that they always have to be happy smiles. They can have tough conversations as well, but it's a healthy kind of relationship, I would say, in comparison to some of the other ones we see.
She's not an integrated person. She's still split, but she has found a way to make it work, which is really fun to watch, and also very, very hopeful.
Yes.
And it reminds me so much of the end of Inland Empire. When Nikki is there surrounded by all of these kind of characters from her story, but there's this feeling of peace and resolution and joy.
I think another thing, just like there's like a lot of imagery in Paprika that I feel can be very Lynchian as well, particularly thinking of that like internet bar cafe thing. It's like so like noir. I think that there's like a lot of that nostalgic kind of noir energy that plays in throughout, which is always so interesting because like I feel like there are like kind of two sides to Paprika in terms of there's like a lot of really bright, colorful scenes, and then there's these very classic muted type scenes with a lot of earth tones, or, you know, like things like that.
Well, to take that even a step further, do you know who voices those bartenders?
No.
The tall one is Satoshi Kon. So it's like our Gordon Cole. And the short one is the author of the novel Paprika.
Oh my gosh.
So those two bartenders are the creators.
I love when we do these deep dives and then we find these things that are even more. I've been a longtime fan of him, and I've learned so much more about him that makes me love him all the more and love his work all the more. And I think that that's how this podcast has been in general for me with David Lynch. It's like every episode we do, I grow even more fond of him and feel even closer to his work, especially, you know, as I get to see the way that it interacts with the world even more, and being able to have a conversation that pulls together two directors that I love so much. When Colin had initially proposed the idea for the episode, I was just like, oh, yes. Oh, Colin, absolutely.
Well, and I'm just so grateful for this introduction to Satoshi Kon that this project has given me, and now I get to be a great fan of his as well.
I don't know, I feel very lucky to do this one. I'm getting really like, I'm gushing a bit. I can't help it.
I love it.
This was a really, really lovely one to do. I was really glad that we did this one.
Me too. I got pretty emotional a couple of weeks ago because I got to go to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art and see David Lynch's Six Men Getting Sick on display. I was the only person in the gallery. I had plenty of time to be a complete weirdo, getting emotional, walking around it and looking at it. And the plaster casts are of David Lynch as a young man, you know, and I'd seen the film version of it on the Criterion Eraserhead. But that's just a flat filmed version of it. So being there in person, it was the last day it was on display too. It was a
perfect time,
really beautiful experience. And of course I was out there in Philadelphia because my daughter was visiting Haverford College, which is the alma mater of Special Agent Dale Cooper.
And it's so, I mean, that's the thing is like, the more you've told me about it, the more I'm like, of course he went there.
Well, it's really funny. So she's committed. I have and we have been watching Twin Peaks together. We just finished this first season. And every time Cooper does something cute, she's like, we go to the same college. He's so Haverford, she says. So I'm really proud and excited. And now I get to wear Haverford gear for 2 reasons.
Yes! Well, and like one of the big things that you told me about it is they have like a serious honor code, that they really take that seriously, and, you know, expect people to be honest and respectful and you know, compassionate with each other. And like, no wonder this character that we love so much would come out of that
environment, of that kind of a community.
He would come out, of course, just the way that we love him. You know.
Another quick story about my daughter watching Twin Peaks. She got to the scene where Audrey is in bed and Cooper comes in, and she was kind of horrified because, you know, Gen Z, they're very sensitive to these kinds of things, and rightly so, and I'm so glad.
Yes.
And she was upset, and I was like, no, wait for the next episode. And then she watched it, and she was squealing with delight at Cooper's reaction. And then she paused it, and she said, okay, I'm so glad he reacted that way, but in Audrey's defense, if I was in her situation, age gap, schmage gap.
Which, when you told me that, I was like, that's literally the reaction I had.
But coming from a Gen Zer who's like, they have all the language around inappropriate age gaps and that sort of thing. Oh, how I laughed. Yeah.
I mean, literally, I remember like watching that in college and being like, oh, he's so good. Oh, he's not like any of like the, you know, terrible men that have taken advantage of me in my youth. How wonderful. But then also in the back of my mind, I was like, but I would want him. I'd be like, yes, thank you for being respectful. Now disrespect me. So, you know.
Should I cut that?
No, okay, honestly, I'll leave it in. Listeners, that's a little gift for you. I don't know.
Well, listeners, in our next episode, we're going directly to an illusion. Bob Engels, the co-writer of Fire Walk with Me, said in 2013 in a panel discussion that he was referencing Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie when he created The Blue Rose. And so we both love The Glass Menagerie, and we're going to reread it and think about it in terms of Fire Walk with Me and Twin Peaks. And so next episode, we're going to be talking about The Glass Menagerie.
I'm very excited. I've been thinking back, and I think it might be one of the first plays I ever saw as a little kid.
Me too, I think. Perhaps that says something about us.
I know, because I was like completely enchanted by it. I was like, I also want glass trinkets, please.
Speaking of escaping into a world.
Yeah. So I think that'll be another fun one to dive into.
Definitely. Well, in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at fullblossomoftheeveningpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can DM us on Instagram at fullblossomoftheevening. And also, if you don't already follow us, I would highly recommend, because as always, we will post images that will correlate with the episodes to give kind of visuals that you can really pair with what we're talking about.
Thank you for listening to The Full Blossom of the Evening. And we'll sign off with...
It was Laura, and she's come to kiss you goodbye.
Goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye.
It was Laura, and I saw her glowing. I saw her smiling. I feel like I'm in a dream tonight.
Vroom, vroom. There's James out there.
I was about to say James. I was like, shut up, James.
James, I love you.
Oh, God.